Hey friends, welcome to the School of Hard Knocks with Darcie, a place where we become unstuck from trauma and grounded in our healing. I'm your host, Darcie, and I'm a proud multi-graduate of the School of Hard Knocks. Life has a way of teaching us lessons we never asked for, but here we take those lessons and turn them into healing, strength, and self-leadership. I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive in.
Just a quick reminder. This podcast shares personal stories and lived experiences. It's not therapy. It's not counseling or legal advice. If you need professional help, please reach out to a licensed provider. Hey, School of Hard Knocks, welcome in. Class is in session. I am here with my Season in Blooming Rebuilt series, and today I am joined by DanRoths. Dan, welcome to the School of Hard Knocks. So nice to have you.
Thank you. I don't remember the last time a white person got to hear that they were part of a School of Hard Knocks seriously. So this is kind of cool.
Well, amen to that. Well, let me introduce you guys to who Dan is. Dan is a TEDx speaker, Amazon best-selling author, strategic people operations executive, and nonprofit advisor. So, having been diagnosed as a neurodivergent in 1989, Dan uses a lifetime of self-reflection, research, and understanding to advocate for others in different spaces. I don't want to give away too much of Dan's story because I want him to be able to tell us about it. So he does have a lot of different things that are really cool and interesting. But what I'm interested in to start out is taking me back to who Dan was before he became all of the things he is now.
That's a great question. I lost is a great way to put it. I I would say not confident, but I don't necessarily think I have a ton of confidence. I would definitely say misdirected. You going through life the way that I have, it's been a series of hyperfocus. So I had to hyperfocus on school to get through school. I had to hyperfocus on social life to understand what body cues and social etiquette actually was. So it was really you. I mean, I guess the best way I would put it is I was driving on a road with no potential destination that I had set out to. And yeah, that's who I was before. And that's not the greatest answer, but it's probably the most honest I could be.
Yeah. Well, what in your opinion or in the knowledge that you have would have brought that kind of emotional imbalance temporarily, right, on for you? I mean, there's a lot of things from our childhood or high school or a past relationship that activates
Oh
some
yeah.
things, you know? So what was that for you?
That so every child is different. And for me, it started off by people not necessarily understanding what I was trying to say. Even though I was verbal, the things that would come out of my mouth were disjointed, muffled. And that's what really set into path the diagnosis of, at that time everything was conjoined and it was just called, it was, we're separated, so it was ADHD and ADD, and going down that path and then discovering that what I was dealing with was something called language processing disorder, which is, there's multiple types, but the type that I have is when you know what you're trying to say, but the connection between what your brain's telling you and what your mouth allows you to express are two different things. So people have a tendency to say, well, you're very run on, you're very verbose. And the component of that is because I'm trying to get to my point and I'm basically buying myself time. So going through that and not being able to communicate even with my family, that from a very early age led to an onset of anxiety and depression. And than eating disorder, body dysmorphia, and this is all before age 11. So in the course of between, let's make the association between 4 and 11, I'm diagnosed ADHD. I have language processing disorder. I'm started on medication. I develop an eating disorder, body dysmorphia, which causes, which the causal effect and the comorbidities are anxiety and depression. I'm talking about seven different things that I had to face just from an intellectual perspective in that 6 year gap, 7 year gap.
Yeah, and I mean, right in the middle of our formative years. I mean, formative years are age 0 to 7. So, smack dab in the middle of when we're really starting to form thought processes and opinions and learning who we are. And, that's got to be really rough. It's interesting for me because what you were describing is semi similar to what my dad had. My dad was a survivor of a workplace shooting, left him with a traumatic brain injury. And part of that was aphasia, and it was like my dad had the ability to have the thought, but when he would try to say it, it would kind of come out like vegetable soup. It was like it was all jumbled unless it was automation. Good morning, how are you? I love you, things like that. So I mean, I can relate to the frustration. I mean, this is my dad was 60 years old when this happened. So being so formed in his life to not being able to even hardly express anything was a really painful thing to watch him go through. How did that transition now into your teenage years? How was high school for you?
High school was a nightmare. College was even worse. And I can't believe I'm saying that because so because of everything I was dealing with from an academic perspective and being on medications and things like that, it took every moment of every day to simply pass through. I think I passed high school with a C minus average. And it wasn't that I wasn't intelligent, it's that uh, some of these challenges, and I always am careful with the language I use because I want to, as a neurodivergent individual, I want to be careful of labeling. So just non sequitur. So, and then on top of that, my parents were, or my father was really, it was important to him that we did at least up until high school, we had to play three sports. So the way my day looked is waking up at 5 in the morning, starting studying, taking medication, going to school, oftentimes getting tutored before school. After school, I went directly into sports. From sports, I went back to tutoring. From tutoring, I went to doing additional work with my mother. Uh, and so it starts at 5 and it ends around 11 p.m. And this goes all the way from the time I'm in first or second grade until I graduate high school. So from an academic perspective, I'm just fighting to get through. And what's happening on the social side is because I'm so focused on the academic, I don't have a social life. I don't understand social cues. I have trouble connecting with people. At the time, even though I had an eating disorder, I wasn't gaining an ounce of weight. So what I was doing is I was relying on my self-worth and value in how I looked physically. So while all this is going on, I'm overly fixating on being in the workout room because it's the one thing I feel like I have control over. So that puts me into a point where I'm already dealing with all these stressors from the academic, but now I'm being reliant on one specific thing to carry me through from a social level and not understanding that dynamic. So I got bullied, I got picked on, I actually wound up getting suspended in high school. I I remember it vividly, but I was always getting into trouble, and I remember there was a gym teacher, and I had done something, and it was, looking back, definitely my fault. And she wanted to call my mom, and I didn't want my mom to be any more upset with me because of that entire dynamic. So I made the decision to put hot sauce in our coffee. Well, I never actually was planning on going through with it, but I had a big mouth because, and I wound up telling people, and one of those individuals, still to this day, I have no idea who ratted on me, told the principal, and I got suspended for 10 days. They were trying to expel me for Tabasco. Uh, so anyway, I barely, like, by the skin of my teeth, passed through high school, and it's really all thanks to my mother. But it was, I played football, I did track and field, I was big into hockey, but the social dynamic, even in those situations, was horrible. So I hated high school. Long
Yeah,
answer to a short question.
no, it's okay. Yeah, it definitely sounds like a lot of very high expectation. And I think parents don't understand because I mean, the ability for you to not be able to have that human connection, and it's so great, like to have your kids in extracurriculars. Like it is really such a great thing. However, a lot of them don't feel comfortable doing that, or it's not their particular cup of tea that they would prefer to do, but they don't get to connect in a social functioning way. I mean, it's very much about, like my nephew, he's in football. So it's very much about what the plays are, running the plays, what the team's going to look like, what we're going to, it's not this have a conversation about things. And most kids, when they're together now, they're on their devices all of the time. So they're not really communicating with each other anyway. How did that transform as you got into college? I mean, were you able
Well,
to connect?
no, and I would say it was the hardest part for me was the toxic masculinity and what we refer to as the locker room talk. Because a component I'll just briefly touch on within my story is I grew up around strong, independent women. I was not accustomed to dealing with male presence. I always just gravitated towards women just because that's what I knew. That's who had taught me. That's who I could count on. So the entire idea of being in the locker room was bad. When I got to college, it was my first time away from home, and uh, for all the interviews I do, talking about college may be the most touchy subject for me. And the reason that is because there's rarely been an instance where somebody's asked me about it to the point of exploration. And I still have PTSD from a lot of the things that happened. So to try to make this as succinct as I can, I go into college and first time being away from home, I want people to like me. At that time, there were two things that I did. One is I'm a storyteller and I fabricated things to make myself seem more interesting. I didn't go into it maliciously lying to people, and it wasn't anything like huge. It was just I have a way to make. I've, I mean, I'm a writer. I did, like that's sort of what I did, what I do. But also, I didn't understand the value of money, so my parents gave me a credit card to use, and they put money on the whatever that the thing for the canteen that they have in colleges, and I would order like $100 worth of Chinese food and share it with the entire dorm to try to make people like me. But by virtue of the fact that I was exaggerating and people were actively calling me a liar, and the fact that I still was dealing with language processing disorder and didn't, I was socially awkward, things I would say were funny, uh, it led to a level of bullying that I still have trouble processing. I'm to the point where I would try to go to sleep and rooms on both sides of me would just spend hours and hours knocking on the walls so that I wouldn't be able to sleep. If I went to take a shower or if I went to use the bathroom, they would soak paper towels, whatever they could, throw old food in the shower, in the toilet while I was sitting there, pushing it open, like trying to actively embarrass me. Um, it never got physical,
Mhm.
but what happened is I got really internal and I turtled. And in turtling, I stopped focusing and I stopped going to classes. I would just basically sleep for the majority of the day. And eventually I failed out of school and had to fight to get back in. My first 2.5 years, like that's what happened. And then in year three is when I wound up in a relationship that led to being a survivor of domestic violence and sexual assault. So one of which what we see or what I try to explain to people as they hear the first part of my story, but then they hear this, is when we talk about recurrent trauma, this is part of it, but also when you're so used to the trauma, you wind up setting yourself up to be in more trauma. And I never had a best friend. I never had somebody that I was so connected with that they could sit me down and say to me, or cared to say to me, hey, this is not a good situation. We need to get you help. We need to get you out of here. So everything that happened, I had to face me, myself, and I. And like the domestic violence and sexual assault, it took me almost 20 years to realize that that's what it was. Because we just don't talk about that in the male community. And it wasn't like I was immune to the idea of it. In college, I worked for, or I volunteered for an organization called 180 Turnaround, which is for rape survivors. I got really involved in gender studies. It was supposed to be my minor. I co-founded the gender studies club at our university. You all of these things were like 2 inches away from me, but I couldn't see it clear enough to realize that those things that I was holding close to me were the things I actually needed support from.
Yeah. Wow. Wow, Dan. We talk a lot here about the School of Hard Knocks, right? And the hard things that we've gone through and the trauma that we were stuck in and how we're grounded in our healing. So I will tell you that I'm thankful that you were courageous enough to just share what you shared because it sheds light on other things to help other people, right? And in sharing our stories, it's hard trying to go back and think about these things. I've gone through compound trauma in my life where it's like, oh boy, am I ever going to catch a break? And I didn't start my self love healing journey until 10 months ago when I was 45 years old and I'm 46. So I held on to a lot of stuff for a very long time. So I commend you for being open and real and raw about it because men and women deal with things sometimes so separately. And it's talked about more over here and not talked about as much over here. And everybody deserves the same level of support, right? So that allowing people to not feel alone is a really important thing. So thank you for being so open and sharing that.
You're welcome, and honestly, thank you for allowing me to talk about the college aspect because, again, that's not. Uh, I talk about a lot of hard stuff, and I do it because I want to set the right example for my kids, and I want them to not feel like they need to be invincible as they get older. But that specific area, that specific bullying, like I still have a very hard time trusting men. I openly admit I have biases against men because of these experiences. Now, what I find sort of unique is, in spite of the fact that I really gravitate towards women, I also am a domestic violence and sexual assault survivor. So the fact that even with all that, I still gravitate, it's there's a self-awareness that I don't necessarily know that people are missing because they just don't know that it's there. And if I look at the benefits of my experiences and being diagnosed when I realized that one of those benefits is that I've had a lifetime of self-exploration, of self-awareness. And in spite of a lot of bad shit happening, I've had some really exceptional role models and sponsors that have given me space to go through this process. And you're right, a lot of men don't talk about it, whether, I mean, but I didn't know my kids are 6.5. I didn't know that men could go through postpartum depression. I, and then I experienced it. There's so many components that we just, because society has created such this hard line divide between what people are supposed to be, whether it's gender, sexuality, or otherwise, we tend to keep them separated. And that's an impediment to growth and to healing.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And I'm a generational curse breaker in my family. And one of my biggest hopes with the School of Hard Knocks is to break a lot of these curses that we have. Like men are supposed to be this way, women are supposed to be this way. And the fact that we have this knowledge because society tells us that is why we need to start changing the way we're thinking. Like for me, when a man gets soft and starts to cry and gets emotional, I'm cheering on the inside because I'm like, yes, let it go. Like, that's so good. There's like no, like, oh my gosh, that's not what men are supposed to do. We're all human. What do you mean? We're not robots. We have emotion. This is how we're supposed to feel. And if you didn't feel that way, I would probably think, what a cold, turned off person who's not truly grounded in their healing. Because when you start to get grounded in healing, you're able to talk about things a little bit differently, especially from a raw point of view. Even if it's hard, you get through it.
And see, I'm of the prevailing opinion that it's not because they don't have the capacity, it's because we actively repress those emotions and push them down. And we don't believe we have the right to let them up. And if we look at even cultural differences, whether we're talking about Hispanic or Black populations and how the history of generational trauma and oppression has come into play, we really see those lines of, well, okay, well, it's not that this person is socially or emotionally unaware. It's that from a cultural perspective, they've had to form this force field around themselves in order to protect themselves from society or from whatever may be going on. And that's a huge component of it. And that's where, as much as we want to say we're all the same, we do have at least we have to get to a point of accepting our differences before we can get to that point of all being the same. So, and this is part of the work that I've had the honor of doing within anti-racism and within that sphere of diversity, equity, inclusion. Is that we do have to go through that process of understanding before we can come back and combine. Or you could just be like me and be a complete abolitionist.
Well, the crazy thing is because for me, I'm an NLP practitioner. And one of the things that I coach on the most is, people being on this self-love journey. and having to love yourself before you can even consider utilizing or applying any other tools that you're going to be taught. And a lot of people have gone through different traumas in their earlier years. I have not had a hard time finding a guest for the School of Hard Knocks. It's a good problem and a bad problem to have at the same time. But a lot of us are very 1 foot into trauma, 1 foot into healing, or still stuck very much in the trauma. And that self-love part of it is what allows us to look at things differently in life. So when we're just huddled up in this little shell and we're just trying to protect ourselves, there's more damage that's being caused. Relating to somebody, finding one person that you can even relate to, even in the mildest of way, is a small step to take to getting outside of that box. I mean, I lived in a box, like I said, for 40 some years before I started. Hey, this is my childhood. This is what happened. This is not good. It's not pretty. It's real bad. It's a real Lifetime movie. But can you connect to that? And all of these people are coming forward with different, really great stories. So now, I mean, talk to me about adult life here, like past that college stuff. What got you into what it is that you're doing now? What gave you the courageousness to be able to do what you do?
So it's a great question. And before I touch on that, I will say to sort of close the loop at our previous conversation, what you're primarily talking, or my perception, I want to be inclusive in my language here, of what you're talking about is a very Americanized version of this. If we look at countries like Italy or Greece or Nigeria, for example, just using three independent, what you'll find is that there is a lot happier undertone. There's a lot more visceral understanding of identity. Because while America claims to be a melting pot can also be a source of getting lost. And the most overused term in my vocabulary is decolonization. And it's because as Americans, there is a lost identity at the very core of where we came from, what we represent, and how we are. So if the School of Hard Knocks, for instance, did a detour over to Europe, I think you would find a very, very, very different set of conversations than you will hear and you will now. So I'll leave that there. As far as
But that is very an interesting point to bring up because I've actually do have global listeners, which is wild to me. But as of late, I've had a lot of different people from Canada and Australia. And it's been awesome to hear this different perspective of things. And in particular, yesterday, I was on a podcast from a couple who lives in Australia or Canada, and they have brought up how things in the United States are ran and how I feel about that. And, that is just what we had a conversation about. And they were very, it is different down there, what is happening where you are. And it was an eye-opening conversation to say the least, and when I say everybody is the same, obviously everybody is not completely the same, but if you cut us all open, we bleed the same. That's just the reality of it. We're humans. No one's robotic. No one has a special part inside of them that we don't all have. Some of us have the ability to be able to overcome these obstacles in our life and still be able to have pain, grief, joy, sadness live in the same container and still be able to have a goal-oriented life. Other people, it may take them much longer to reach that level, but they're still able to do it. And some people just aren't able to do it at all. Whether that's the inability to understand the steps that it takes to actually become unstuck from trauma and stuck in healing or grounded in healing, or if there's the lack of desire. Some people are happy and content with the way that they're living. I have 8 siblings. There's 9 of us. We all grow up in trauma. 8 out of 9 of us are productive parts of society. One brother is consistently unhoused and currently in jail right now for another alcohol domestic charge. If that's how he chooses to use his time and live his life, I've become accepting of that. Not everybody has the ability to move through the way that I have. So it's not a critique of everybody should be able to do the things. Hopefully, the majority does have at least a little bit of the ability to take a step forward to some type of joy and happiness.
Oh, absolutely. Uh, it's a lot easier to fall in a hole and get focused on a negative emotion than it is to peel back the layers of why we're in a hole, why we have the negative emotion, and move forward. Because once you go through the process, once you go through the understanding, what happens is you go from a very small, narrowly focused room into a wide open prairie. And at that point, you realize that you're constantly having to look in all directions because there's so many things that are coming at you. For instance, I forget who told me, but my friend said to me, we're all born with bias. And I thought about that for a second. Yeah, you're kind of right. We're born forming opinions and through nurture garnishing those opinions about who others are, what others should could be, and it's innate. It's innate with us to have biases. Having biases is not inherently wrong. What's wrong is when we take those biases and allow them to influence how we act and react in society. So when we talk about doing the work and how hard it is, once we understand this, then we walk into a room and say, okay, well, this is the situation. This is what's happening. Why is this person acting and reacting this way? Why is that person reacting? And then what is the infrastructure how this room is set up, playing a role and compounding whatever is happening? That's a lot more to think about, not even taking into account how we are going to react and act, than it would be just going in and storming.
Yeah.
So it's it's both a freeing and frustrating thing to have to go through. But I would I would simply say once your eyes are open, they can never be closed.
Yeah, amen to that. And I know that my listeners, because they hear me say this all the time, and I have to point it out because you can tell people that are grounded in healing by the terminology that a lot of us use, you know? So what you just said, they hear it from me all of the time. We cannot always control the situation or the circumstances around us, but we can always control our reactions and how we respond to it. That's where your power is. There are situations that are happening that you have no control over, but how are you going to react and respond to it? That shows a lot about your character. It shows a lot about your work because healing is work. This is not an easy thing to do. It takes time and dedication. There's not a magic word or wand or pill that can be taken. It's like, oh, everything from the last 40 some years is just all better now. It's a moving through it. I mean, I'm first 10 months into my journey, but you're so right because now that my eyes are opened, I'm never going back. It's impossible. My main goal now is to protect my peace and my joy because once you experience it after having compound trauma, when you feel that, that is a feeling that you want to just live in forever.
And you're going to see that there's layers to this, right? And when I talk, I've had people come up to me and this, there's a thought that I must have it all figured out because I'm eloquent in how I speak. I'm honestly not practiced because I never ask for questions ahead of time. This is just sort of how I am. But to peel back the curtain a little bit, even now, like right in this moment, I'm going through another layer of processing because I've been out of work for 3 years. I've done consulting work. I've done a lot of really cool stuff. I've built a lot of really cool programs. But by virtue of my situation, I've been out of work, and that puts a lot of pressure on the inner family relationship, especially between my wife and I, who's my hero. So one of the things I'm realizing is because of that, I looked back and there was a situation that sparked it that I won't get into, but I I looked back at our relationship because I really do credit my wife from turning me from a kid into a full functioning human being. And what I realized is, and this is just in the last month, is that because of my trauma, when I met my wife, I saw her as stoic. I saw her as put together. I looked at her as invincible. And because of that, I t it wasn't intentional, but I leaned on her, assuming that she couldn't break. I took advantage. Something as simple as you she's ordering lunch for herself. Oh, automatically I can ask if she wants to if I could have something. Or emotionally, you we have kids that are both my children are autistic, and there'll be moments where I'm super overwhelmed and I'll just call, "Hey, Jen," when I should have thought about, well, how is she in this moment? How is she feeling and how is she thinking? So I've had this tendency to over rely. And this conversation that sparked this was so serious and like, this is the love of my life that I looked back and I saw every instance in our 14, 15 years together of times where I've been overly relied and I've taken advantage or I've done things thinking that they were putting a band-aid like and it's not the case. So now in this moment, I'm having to reset and start thinking about, well, I can't change the past, but going forward, if I'm going to be a true partner, not just in voice and in pledge, but in action, how can I be a better husband? How can I be a better man? So these are things I actively am going through that showcase, and I hope showcases for your audience that you may, when you go through a healing journey, you start with awareness, and then the more and more that comes up, and the more layers you pull back, it gets harder and harder and harder. And you can't run from that fear if you really love the people around you and what this is affecting. If you even really love yourself, and I can't say I love myself, then you need to put in the work.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope you can get to a level of where you feel like you love yourself, Dan. I feel like that's, and I was talking about this with somebody yesterday and she asked me, well, how do you do that? How do you even love yourself? And it's different for everybody, right? Like my self-love journey started with slowing down. Like I just move so fast. It's emails and this and scheduling this, and I'm drinking coffee while I'm trying to focus on all the things. It's slowing down. But after my dad died, it was giving myself grace, not trying to push myself through another event, not trying to put what I call the superwoman cape on. I don't know if men have something similar. Maybe it's a mask, maybe it's a beret. I don't know.
It's diapers.
But for women, it's a superwoman cape. And when you're able to take that off and just give yourself the time and the grace. But if somebody were to put, what I asked yesterday, if I were to put a tray in front of you and there were 5 or 10 different things on it that make you feel good, make you feel happy, what's the first thing you would grab? And whatever that first thing is you would grab, that's what I would encourage people to start with. It's a small step. A small step
Yep.
into loving yourself. I love hearing what you're saying because it's interesting to me that you are on this journey that you are on because your awareness to things is very heightened. And typically, when you get to that level of heightened awareness of other people's feelings around you and not just what we're feeling, You are on like a self-love journey, but you just said that you aren't. So what you just said about your wife is beautiful and wonderful and so incredible, and the way that's going to change the dynamic in your marriage and the love and respect that she's going to feel. And it's a great thing, because a lot of women hold that kind of stuff in because it just feels like their job and what they just do now. So for you to admit that validated her, right? And made her feel like, man, he sees me. He knows everything I've done.
It, I've always claimed that I can see my wife, and she is my hero. She's my icon. She's the reason for my being. I love her with a passion and clarity that I can't properly express in words. But the way that my life has transpired, the way that I've operated has been that of, if one thing is not going right, like let's use the job search as an example, then I'll get hyper focused on getting involved in the girls' school and work to create things better for them. Now that's great, right? That's positively intentioned. But when I get hyper focused, I also lose sight of some of the other things that are really important, like bringing in an income and spending enough time and separating enough so that I'm still taking the time to work on finding a job. But because I'm doing this, I'm thinking, okay, well, this is going to make her proud. And it goes back to this entire idea of we have a tendency to do the things that we think somebody would appreciate instead of thinking to ourselves, what would they actually appreciate? And then putting our foot forward in order to ensure that we're following through with that. And it's something that I'm very aware of on an outward uh, perspective, and that I talk about a lot when it comes to communication and corporate and others. But carrying it through with in your own personal life is the most challenging piece. And it's so I really hope that I didn't realize it too late, because I do realize, being together this long, I have a lot to make up for, but we can't always set in our own time when things happen and when we realize things and when things hit home. All that I could do in this moment is realize that I'm not reverting back to the way I was, and I'm going to put in every ounce of effort for the rest of my life to ensure that she feels seen.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. One of the things that my self-love and healing journey has learning to be accountable for my own stuff. And, we teach people how to treat us by what we allow. And it's interesting in, marriage in particular, because I could say the same thing, about my husband, where my husband is so used to, Darcie just running the show and everything is taken care of. And I don't have to really worry about it. This food just randomly shows up on time. And like the toilet paper is stocked all of the time. And how does it, there's like a little fairy. Like, how does that even happen? And I could also be saying, hey, babe, I'm really busy. Could you possibly do this or could you possibly do that? For women in particular, like I said, with that stupid superwoman cape, a lot of us wear it with pride. A lot of us wear it like, I don't even worry about him doing any of that stuff because I got it, but we don't. We don't. And when you take it off and you can actually humble yourself a little bit to be like, yeah, maybe I should ask, or maybe I should ask in the right way where because I don't want to make my husband feel bad or less than. I want him to be a partner. Like we're playing for the same team. We watch football. This isn't the Packers against the Vikings. Like we're on the same team here.
Yeah, but if you're adhering to traditional gender roles, is that really being a team? And here's why I challenge this and ask this. So one of the things my wife and I agreed on when we first got together is we did not want to abide by traditional gender roles. I have taken my daughters to every single one of their doctor's appointments. I'm the one that does the laundry. I'm the one that cleans the house. My wife's a lot better at cooking than I am, but most nights I'm cooking. I am a really, really, really staunch advocate for an even distribution of emotional labor in the household, which does not happen. The way that I perceive how society operates is that it's a 70-30 split where women are doing the 70 and men are doing the 30. And for us to actively showcase, especially to our young women, that they could be anything that they want to be, that they can advocate for themselves, we have to get to a 50-50 split. And that doesn't mean it's always going to be 50-50, but true partnership is not you asking, it's your husband, and I'm not being critical of your husband.
I
It's
know.
it's saying, it's the husband saying, "Hey, I realize how much you've been doing. What can I do to support you?" But also having the intuition to do it before you have to ask.
Yeah, and that would be such a beautiful thing. But in my husband's situation, he was very coddled as a child. And for me, I'm the oldest of nine, and so I'm used to taking care of. So we kind of placated off of those two things. We've been together for 27 years, married for 21. So this is a very, very long relationship of figuring out the right, not roles, but the right way to support each other.
The only thing I'm going to push back on you with, respectfully, I grew up in a traditional Jewish household where my mom did everything. I was very much coddled. If I can go from being coddled to having the understanding that being coddled as an adult is not being a true partner, then anybody can. And yeah, it's hard work and I'm not taking away from the fact that it is, but I also don't believe in the perpetuation of bad behavior.
Yeah, it's definitely an awareness, that once people become aware of it, that, like you said, now that your eyes are open, there's no going back. Once somebody gets made aware of something that's happening, when they're made aware of it, some people just are not aware of things. They're just not. And when they are made aware of it, that's when your line in the sand gets drawn. That's where the boundary is. And when the boundary gets crossed, well, for me, I've taught people, a lot of people, how to treat me by what I've allowed. So I'm not going to instantaneously just assume, well, I told you that this isn't what I want anymore in this life, in this relationship, in this conversation. And the first time they do it, I'm not going to get pissed off and be like, well, you're done. I already told you. Because, I got to give them a second, three times. I'm kind of like the three striking out. So a friendship got left in last year, and a brother of mine, we've kind of cut ties this year because you've been talked to, you've been warned, and that's the reality of how this is going to work. Because again, going back to protecting my peace and my joy, that's where that line in the sand is. But I'm aware. I'm aware of this way that I'm feeling and that I don't want to ever go back to that kind of disrespect. So now that we're talking about that as an adult, here you are, right? Out here sharing these stories and these things and doing all of this really awesome stuff. After going through all of that stuff and your current things, how have you been able to maneuver to here to where now you've become an impact in other people's lives?
That may be a longer story than we have time for. Uh, so in short, my goal was never to be a quote unquote influencer. I was at a point right after my kids were born where I was unemployed and I was trying to find work. I had to separate myself from others, so I went on social media to brand myself, but I made a decision to do it my way. So I said out to the world, "Hey, I'm not going to mask anymore. This is who I am." And there was a freedom that came with that. And to make a long story short, uh, I created a post that generated 100,000 plus views every week and 1,000 plus comments that ran for 2 years. And then, so I started gaining 1,000 connection requests per week, and I started gaining views, and people started listening to me. So now I had this platform. Well, am I going to use it for good or for bad? And I chose to use it for good. So I started talking about mental health, and I started talking about parenting. I started talking about maternity rights and menopausal rights. And I started expressing about my story with body dysmorphia and eating disorders. And even after I stopped doing that post because burnout, uh, I realized that, and then my kids were born. I realized I have an ability to do things that not very many people are comfortable doing. Not everybody feels comfortable speaking on stages. And I have social anxiety in person, really bad. But my superpower is once I get on that stage. So I've had these opportunities, and now I've gained notoriety around the world. I've built a program in our school district that just purchased 17 adaptive swings for kids with um, physical and intellectual disabilities. I just took a spot as advisory board member for a new 501c3 called the Institute for Generational uh, Trauma for generational healing. She's going to be angry at me for messing that up. You and I'm trying to do all this in addition to the book, in addition to the TEDx, in addition to the next TEDx, as a way to create legacy and to show kids, especially young women, that life can be what you make of it, but we have to put in the work. So, long story short, it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen through intent. I still get very uncomfortable talking about a lot of the things that I do because most of the time I'm not doing it for others, but I accept the responsibility that was put on my shoulders, and I'll be damned if I let anyone down.
I love that. I love that. And you have got such a great story to tell. And I love the way that you tell it and the way that you're so in your healing journey. It's a really beautiful thing to see.
And I think that we're always going to be in our healing journey, right? Nobody has a perfect childhood. Nobody has, I mean, maybe Jeff Bezos' kids. Uh, Nobody has invincibility to mental health. So once we accept it, and not to quote AA, but one, it was the things we cannot change. Once we accept the things we cannot change, then there's freedom.
Mm.
What you choose to do with that freedom is up to you. And you're not going to hear me bashing anybody for not speaking up or for not doing what I'm doing because not everybody's comfortable doing that. But there's freedom internally. And that's peace of mind. Now, to close loop on your question about earlier about loving yourself, it's a beautiful ideology to say we should each love ourselves. The reality is a much different story. We can appreciate the things that we do, we can appreciate the things that we are, but if we've never felt that internal love, then we don't know how to accept it. For me personally, it's impeded by the fact that I do have body dysmorphia, that I always will have body dysmorphia. So if I can't look in the mirror and be happy, it's hard for me to look internally. Am I proud of the person that I am? Sure. But then remember, there's always, whether it's the job search or there's always challenges. So it gets to a point where just when you think you could say, "Hey, I'm really happy with myself," there's an association with love and accomplishment, and that's a really tough barrier to to break. So there's a lot of idiosyncrasies with it, but I will say I appreciate the person I am. I am proud of who I have become, and I believe in the work that I am doing. And that's as close as I can come to saying I love myself.
Have you given up on
On
trying to love yourself, or do you continue to try different things to work on that? Because if you've given up on it, right? I mean, there's not going to be any type of progress at all. Just like with people being in healing. If something isn't working for us and we just give up, that's why we call it grounded in healing. We're not going anywhere once we're here. We're here, but we're still going to have to heal through things, right? So even if you haven't given up on it and you're still kind of working on it, you're still headed in a positive direction.
Given up to me means that you're not open to it. That's not what I'm saying in any capacity. In fact, I just restarted therapy, and therapy is something that I have a very love-hate relationship with. Uh, like many others, perhaps I have my own reasons for it. What I would say is that I don't believe that I am in a capacity to force it, because every time I force something, it tends to not work out, or it tends to be a little bit narrow, or and so like when my kids were born and I had this epiphany on what I needed to do, I feel like this is going to be the same sort of thing where at a certain point I'm going to realize, okay, what's more important to me is when all is said and done, that I can look back and say I gave every ounce of myself, every effort, every bit of intelligence and humility and empathy to create a better place for those I love. And it is in that that I will take the most pride.
Yeah, and I absolutely love that and for you. And we talk a lot about self-love here. So I think it's great that you're doing everything you're doing. Thank you so much for sharing it all with us today. I know that you are accessible on every single place, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn.
Yeah. If anybody's looking to pay me to speak, bookdantospeak@gmail.com. I am part of a speaker bureau. You could see my TEDx, just search Dan Roth and TEDx. It's on my journey with eating disorder and body dysmorphia, and then how it's influenced my parenting. I have another TEDx in 2027 on inclusive play. My book is part of an anthology, but I'll be writing my own as soon as I have time, which means never. Uh, but yeah, I'm easy to find, easy to talk to, and I don't leave messages unanswered.
I love that. And all of Dan's links are going to be posted in the description below. So thanks for hanging out with us today, Dan. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, School of Hard Knocks, you already know what to do. After you watch this episode, go and find Dan on all of the platforms, like, love, follow, comment, share, do all of the things. There's more than enough room at the top of this mountain for all of us. And as always, when you are walking with the Lord, healing is always possible. I'll see you guys in the next episode. I'd like to thank you for sharing your time with me today. And I'm so proud of you for stepping into your healing journey. Please share this with every single person that you know. I'm here to make the biggest impact possible, and I can only do that with you by my side. I hope you hit that follow button and you save me to your library so you never miss an episode. We just took another break out of your wall, and remember, with God, healing is always possible. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.